So I don't know if anybody else was struck by this, but in a small portion of the Starving the Beast film that we watched, in the midst of focusing on the student debt crisis in this country, there was talk about income share agreements, and Marco Rubio was featured in the film as being a proponent of income share agreements or ISAs. And I was struck by these. I've never heard of them before, but for those who don't remember from the film, ISAs are contracts between companies, which become lenders or funders for these agreements. And sometimes also universities. Purdue University is an institution which offers ISAs. So it's a contract between a lender, like a company or an institution, and a student or a borrower. And that agreement is to say that the company will fund part or all of the student's educational costs in exchange for a percentage of the student's future income over any number of years. And it's important to just step back for a moment and recognize that ISAs have been marketed as being financial products, not as private loans. They've also gone unregulated for many years. ISAs are actually nothing new, but they're becoming increasingly popular because of that student debt crisis that I mentioned before. So in my op-ed, I wanted to learn a little bit more, a little bit more about ISAs, which led me to the ISA Student Protections Act of 2022. This is a bill that's been created with bipartisan support by Marco Rubio, who I mentioned before, Republican senator, as well as Senators Warner, Coons, and Young. And this bill has been in the news a lot recently as being sort of an answer to the problem of ISAs functioning in an unregulated market, in gray zones, without consumer protections. And ISAs are known to take advantage of students, or at least that's what critics have said. Critics like Senator Elizabeth Warren, for example. So what I did was look through the bill, and I am opining or arguing that this new bill is not enough to protect students from predatory income share agreements. And so I'll kind of talk about my two reasons. The first is that income share agreements will not be changed fundamentally by this bill. They will still be set up in that same way with that same basic framework that I described before. And because of that basic framework, more often than not, students will actually end up spending more money in an ISA than they will by just taking out traditional federal loans. So not every student in every kind of program is eligible for federal loans, and that's why ISAs came about to begin with. But more and more students who are eligible for traditional federal loans are taking out ISAs. And they're spending more money in the long run, but they just don't know it. So the federal interest rate on loans right now is 4.99%, but ISA interest rates are variable. There's no static number, and your repayment costs actually go up when your earnings increase. So students who go into majors and have the expectation that they're going to earn a lot will pay more in the long run, almost guaranteed. So this bill is not the answer to the student debt crisis that it's being marketed to borrowers as. So that's reason number one. It's kind of a sham for that reason, I think. Reason number two is that these ISAs are being peddled with unclear and exploitive terminology. So remember, I said that they were talked about by legislators and by lenders as being financial products rather than as private loans. And you'll see that the bill does this as well in the very beginning. It still calls itself a financial product, even though the education department has already declared that these are private loans and therefore need to have consumer protection laws. So I will ease up a little bit and acknowledge and say that yes, this bill does offer important consumer protections. It requires disclosure agreements. It sets caps on a repayment timeline, still up to 20 years. It doesn't expire your loans until up to 30 years. And you have to make at least $30,000 to start your repayment, but $30,000 is not a lot of money for then up to maybe 12% of your income to be taken. They've capped it at up to 20% of your income can be taken to repay back whoever you were lending from, which is a lot of money. So in the end, my primary argument is that if the bill is passed, it's not going to offer enough protection for these students, and it's not actually going to solve the issue of the student debt crisis in the long run. So these agreements are predatory, and that's the stance that I'm taking. And this bill does not solve that issue, despite how it's being talked about. So I look forward to reading everybody else's op-eds. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.